He tasks me. He tasks me, and I shall have him. I'll chase him round the moons of Nibia, and round the Antares maelstrom, and round perdition's flames before I give him up.
That was really good.
Why, thank you.
That was
You tell
awesome.
the baby seen this movie several times?
I can't.
Welcome to Your Pick, a film podcast. I'm Geneva.
And I'm Tatum.
We're two friends who love movies and love sharing them with each other. Each week, we take turns picking a film that is close to our hearts and talk about why it moves us, to tears, to laughter, and everything in between. We celebrate the craft of filmmaking, as well as the unique and personal ways we find meaning in the movies we watch. So, speaking of the movies we watch, Tatum, what have you been watching recently?
Well, believe it or not, I have started working again, which means that I don't really have much time to watch things. So, what I have watched this week is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Yeah, I turned on a few comfort things when I came home from work just to kind of calm myself down before going to sleep. So I watched a few episodes of The Office, some episodes of Rick and Morty, and a little bit of Parks and Rec. But yeah, for the most part, it's just been come home, go to sleep, and that's it. So, but some classic Office and Rick and Morty is always a good choice to go with. So yeah. I'm pretty boring though, and probably will be for the foreseeable future. So,
well, that's what sitcoms exist for,
exactly.
Among other things. They're great comfort food.
Yeah,
when you're feeling stressed.
Yeah, but Geneva, I know you've been watching some fun things, so I'd love to hear about that.
Well, I've been watching the opposite of comfort food. Ironic, considering that I've had an extremely busy couple days at work too. But so I just today finally caught up on Tar. I watched Tar. I loved it. Kate Blanchett is incredible, as everyone has been saying. I'm very excited to go and start looking online and see what other people think about the ending, because I'm very, I'm really curious about what people think about the ending, because it is very abrupt, which I'd heard in the past and still somehow was not prepared for. But I can see a couple different possible readings of it. So yeah, I'm excited to see what other people have to say about it. But yeah, it's great. And I'm excited to see how it does in the Oscar nominations and awards in the upcoming months.
I really, really, really want Todd Fields to win Best Director. I mean, I really want him to win. He's not going to, but I really want him to.
The other two things that I've watched recently is I did kind of a Shakespearean tragedy doubleheader, which is always a good time. So I watched the Amazon Prime King Lear, starring Anthony Hopkins as King Lear, recently, which is really, really good. It's the third version of King Lear that I've seen. I've seen Ian McKellen's version from 2008, years ago, which was King Lear is one of my favorite of Shakespeare's tragedies, and that version was a big activator in why I saw Derek Jacobi play it on stage in college, which was awesome. But I was really blown away by Anthony Hopkins' performance. It's this interpretation. It's a really interesting counterpoint to, or a companion piece to, his performance in The Father, because this is very much a Lear who is facing dementia and is making erratic decisions, and the people around him are kind of just confused about how to deal with it, and also taking the opportunity to use his weakness to gain power for themselves. And the setting is contemporary. It's all modern Britain in the costuming and the sets and the props and everything like that. So it's a very sort of fresh take on it. Florence Pugh is in it. She's wonderful. Emma Thompson and Emily Watson, and Yeah, it's all star-studded, great British actors from top to bottom. Yeah, I thought it was really good. I also saw the 2015 version of Macbeth with,
Ah, yeah.
yeah, Michael Fassbender, Marianne Cotillard. Cotillard?
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you seen that version, Tatum?
No, that's literally that's one of those movies that has been on my mental watch list like for almost 10 years, literally ever since it came out. I'm like, I really need to watch that movie. And I still haven't watched it, but I really
I
want to.
recommend it. It's on
Yeah.
HBO Max right now. It's actually leaving at the end of the month. So
Oh my gosh. Thank you
yeah,
so
so
much
get
for
on it.
telling me that because it's in my HBO Max watch list and I've just been lazy and not watching it. So thank you for telling me that. I will go watch it ASAP.
You're welcome. Yeah, I really, really like this version. It's the sort of moody, atmospheric period version of the play that I've kind of always pictured in my head whenever I read Macbeth. It really focuses in on the theme of parents and children, fathers and sons, parents wanting to pass down their lineage to their children, and the sort of um, repressed frustration that comes when they're not able to, which I thought was really interesting. Michael Fassbender and Marianne Cotillard are both wonderful as as you would expect. The costuming is beautiful, the cinematography is beautiful. So yeah, I highly recommend that one as well. So yeah, that's been my week. Three kind
Yeah.
of dark and very emotionally intense tragedies, basically, but very
You
very different.
know, when you're in the mood, you got to just go all in, right?
Yep.
And
Sometimes that's
yeah.
just how it be.
And speaking of HBO Max, you actually reminded me of something that I did watch this week. It's probably going to be out of date by the time you guys all listen to this episode, but I started watching the HBO show The Last of Us. The
Oh, yes, with
Pedro Pascal.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
The first episode premiered this last Sunday, and I will say it's off to a good start. I'm excited to see where we go from here. I'm definitely locked in for the foreseeable future. So we'll see how it plays out. But I enjoyed the
Good. I've
first
been
episode.
wondering how that is. Yeah, because video game adaptations don't have the greatest track
Yeah.
record, but I'd been hearing good
Yeah.
things about this, so yeah, I hope
I
it
mean,
stays strong.
Geneva, that Pac-Man movie was pretty good. Is that what it was
Sure.
called? Pac-Man with like Adam Sandler or whatever?
I think you're thinking of Pixels,
Oh yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
the
Pixels.
classic
You
Pixels.
know, Pac-Man, Pixels,
Have not seen
potato,
it.
potato, same thing.
Same diff.
Love
Pac-Man
Adam
was definitely
Sandler. Love Adam Sandler, but I don't understand the movies that he chooses sometimes. But that's fine. He's like a bajillionaire, so he can do what he
yeah.
wants.
Whatever makes him happy.
Yeah.
Um,
That would be an interesting question. I wonder if that movie made him happy or if he was just like, whatever. I don't
I
know.
mean, if I could just hang out with my friends and get paid millions of dollars, that would make me happy.
True.
So,
True.
and he is a legitimately fantastic actor, you know, as
Yep.
we both know. So,
Oh yes. Love him.
whatever Adam Sandler wants to do, good for him.
Yep.
All right. Well, so this week, today on the show, we are discussing Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan from 1982. Directed by Nicholas Meyer, starring William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, and Ricardo Montalban. Wrath of Khan is the second of 6 Star Trek films that were made with the original series cast. The story is a sequel to the episode Space Seed, which I think was in season 1, possibly season 2. But Space Seed introduces Khan Noonien Singh, who is a genetically engineered Superman who attempts to take over the Enterprise. He's eventually defeated and banished to an uninhabited planet along with his followers by Captain James T. Kirk. So in this film, Khan and his followers are discovered by the crew of the Reliant while on an exploratory mission for Project Genesis, which is a scientific research project led by Dr. Carol Marcus, who is Kirk's ex-girlfriend. Using Genesis, Khan lures Kirk into a confrontation and attempts to exact revenge on him. His plans are only foiled by an act of sacrifice by Mr. Spock, who's Kirk's best friend. This film was both a critical and a box office hit. It not only revitalized interest in the Star Trek universe, but it is also beloved on its own merits for the way it balances action, There's the Shakespearean theatricality of Montalban's villain performance, which is, in my opinion, just an all-time villain performance. And the grounded and mature rumination that it has on aging, regret, friendship, and sacrifice. So this film, I was introduced to at a pretty young age, probably middle school or so. My parents, neither of them are big Trekkies. Honestly, I'm not much of a Trekkie either. But for whatever reason, they both loved the Star Trek movies. And so I kind of grew up watching two, three, four. Didn't see six until much later. But yeah, two, three, and four. That was kind of on regular rotation when I was growing up. And I really fell in love with this movie and with the chemistry between the um the cast. It wasn't until much later that I went back and actually watched the original series along with my brother, and it's really fun to go back because you're seeing you start with this movie, which is kind of intentionally taking the series in a much more dark and adult direction in certain ways, and you go back to the series, and that show, it does have a lot of um, sort of serious themes in certain ways. There are many episodes which are kind of explicitly commenting on things that are going on in the world, or providing sort of political commentary on various themes, or waxing poetical about philosophical ideas. But it's also a 60s sci-fi show where the budget of each one is far less than the budget of an episode nowadays, and a lot of the episodes can be very silly and very campy, in a good way. It's very enjoyable, but it is really interesting kind of comparing where this movie specifically, which really changes the look and feel of Star Trek, where it takes the franchise versus where the franchise first came from. So, Tatum, what is your history with the Star Trek franchise, if any? Do you have any prior history with this movie?
Yeah, so my history with just Star Trek in general is pretty minimal. I remember growing up, my mom used to always tell me that she was a big Star Trek fan. She loved watching it when she was little. But that being said, she never exposed me to Star Trek at all. Like she never showed me the show or any of the movies or anything. So quite literally up until yesterday when I watched this movie, my only exposure had been the most recent iterations with Chris Pine. And
the J.J. Abrams movies.
Yeah, and the first one, which I think I enjoyed when I saw it, but I haven't seen it since I first saw it when it first came out. And then the second one, I remember hating it.
Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, I just remember thinking it was ridiculous. So, to be perfectly honest, when when you said that you wanted to watch this movie, I was like, wait, there are Star Trek movies? I didn't even know that. I literally thought it was like just the TV show and then the Chris Pine movies. And I remember like I had this image in my brain of seeing Patrick Stewart in Star Trek clothing at some point, but I never thought about, oh, I wonder if that was in a movie, because he clearly wasn't in the TV. I don't know. I was not aware of how much Star Trek stuff
there is so out much there. Star Trek out there,
and it seems to be ridiculous. Like it was a fairly consistent franchise for decades. It wasn't just the TV show and then it disappeared for 40 years and came back. So yeah, anyway, that's my history or lack thereof with Star Trek. As far as my reaction to this movie, I enjoyed it. I mean, it's not the best thing I've ever seen. But I did really enjoy it. And Geneva, this is the second movie that you have had us watch where I was like, man, I wish I saw this when I was a kid. I feel like I would have been all over this. Because I feel like there's certain movies where you reach an age and you can appreciate it, but you just feel a sense of it's not as fun as it would have been if I was like 8 years old, And I wish I had that experience and that nostalgia to look back on, because this world is really fun and super engaging and interesting. But I think because I'm coming to it at an older age, it didn't have as much magic for me as I feel like it was meant to have. But that being said, I did still enjoy it. It was a good time, and it was a very digestible runtime. It wasn't too long, which I'm grateful for. So yeah, I had a good time with it. Yeah, I'm not gonna keep repeating myself and talking in circles over and over. So I will stop talking there. But thanks for choosing this. I'm glad to say that I can finally say that I've seen something Star Trek that's not the most recent J.J. Abrams ones. I feel like, I don't know, that's almost a rite of passage. You have to see something that's like from the original. I don't know. Was this
Yeah.
movie, is this the same cast that was in the TV show, or is this a different cast?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So just for context, so the TV show, there were 3 seasons of it that ran between I want to say 66 to 69, kind of the late 60s. It was a it was sort of, and this is kind of just me going off the dome, so I might get a couple of details here wrong, but my understanding is that it was not necessarily a huge hit at the time, but it had a very beloved, like, dedicated fan base. So it was actually
Yeah.
canceled after 2 seasons, but the fans launched a write-in campaign and got it brought back on the air for a third season, and that's basically the first time that's ever happened. This is kind of the show that launched the idea of like fans who are dedicated to a show. So yeah, it ran for 3 seasons. Then the first movie was Star Trek: The Motion Picture. The first movie was made in, I think, '79. Um, and that movie, it was a hit. And it was kind of mixed in the reception. It's a very much like you take one episode of the show and then you stretch it out into two, like a 90-minute to 2-hour runtime.
Right.
It's clearly very influenced by 2001: A Space Odyssey, because there are some long sequences of just like special effects and flashing lights, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very meditative. So it's not a bad movie, but it is a little bit, it's slower in its pace. Whereas this movie is more like,
It feels like a complete story. It feels like a movie.
mhm, yes, yeah, it's like, we're gonna actually have a villain. It's not just gonna be like a problem they have to solve. It's like, here's a villain who is, has his own kind of storyline and his own emotional arc. Um, it's an action movie. There are scenes of conflict and shooting. I mean, it's not the most, by our standards, it might seem a little bit slow in parts, but it's a bit more fast paced than what came before. And it really did, I mean, like I mentioned before, it really did kind of change what Star Trek looked like. It brought in these red uniforms that the characters all wear, which were new to the franchise. The uniforms that they wore previously looked completely different. And it also added a little bit more, um, kind of in the way of like regulation and military procedure to how the characters were interacting, which hadn't really been there before, and which I think really fits with what the movie is. The movie is basically like, I mean, I've seen it described before as a submarine movie. It's a lot of it is like something out of, The Hunt for Red October, where it's these characters in separate locations speculating on what the other person is doing, and when they communicate, it's only over radio or over screams, or like a Master and Commander or something like that. Where the ships kind of swing past each other and do firing passes and then go off and regroup. And so yeah, the style of it is really, really interesting. Oh, but sorry, yeah, I was giving the context for this. Yeah, so there was the TV show, then they made 6 movies in total with the original series cast. And then there was the next show was Star Trek: The Next Generation, and that had Patrick Stewart as the lead, the captain in that show. And that's a takes place like decades after the original series is supposed to take place. And I'm not sure how much overlap there is in terms of when the original series movies versus the Star Trek: The Next Generation TV show came out. They might have overlapped by a few years. But then Next Generation had its own set of movies, and there have been other TV shows after that that have come out. But yeah, so that's the original series Star Trek and its TV show and movies. Oh, sorry. I wanted to leave a blank in case you had any comment or something on that.
No, just listening.
Okay. Yeah, and then the J.J. Abrams movies were taking the characters from the original series and reimagining them. The idea is that it's an alternate timeline, and so it's the same characters, but what if their lives had gone a little bit differently? And so they still came together and were on the Starship Enterprise together, but under different circumstances. And so Star Trek, the second one, what is that? Star Trek Into Darkness, I think,
Yeah.
does kind of just redoes Wrath of Khan again, but
But it's so
way
so much
worse.
worse.
Like
So much worse.
they cast Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan, which is like, oh
Such
my
terrible
goodness.
casting.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
really
Like
I'm a fan of Benedict Cumberbatch,
yeah,
but
he's a really good actor
especially
when he's used well, but like it's why on earth would you think that he could play Khan? Like come on. So, yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you had something else to say there.
nope.
Yep. Okay. Um so anyway, why don't we start then with talking about the character of Khan and Ricardo Montalban's performance. So Khan is, as I mentioned before, he's this genetically altered Superman. In the original show, he is this character who had basically come to power in the very futuristic 1990s and had amassed this following and tried to take over the world. And he's kind of presented in the show as a sort of analog to Napoleon with a little bit of Hitler thrown in, this sort of totalitarian dictator, but who is sort of very charismatic. And so the characters have these sort of admiration for him, even though they also acknowledge that he is a terrible person. Um, but he is this sort of, Ricardo Montalban is just so charismatic, in everything that he's able to do and the way he carries himself in his just how commanding he is. And in this movie, this really, really, for me, carries over. He is this character who has, after years of being abandoned on this planet and seeing his wife die, he's just absolutely gone mad with hatred and this desire for vengeance. And yet you're still, you just want to see, you're just so fascinated by everything he does. Every line out of his mouth is just something that echoes around in my mind. There's so many great lines in this movie. Um, and it's this movie, it's taking all of these analogs from classic literature, which always makes me happy. So he's a lot of the movie he's quoting Moby Dick, he's Captain Ahab, from hell's heart I stab at thee, all that sort of thing. Yeah, so he's just like, he can't let anything go. He finally is able to escape the planet with his people, and yet, and he could just take them to a safe place and they could start over, and yet he refuses to. He has to take Kirk down. He has to know that Kirk is defeated, and that's just ultimately his undoing. So anyway, what did you think of the character of Khan and the performance?
I think, and I mean this in the highest compliments, I think that his performance was insane. Like the character
Uh-huh.
of Khan is absolutely outrageous. His costume is crazy. His
Mm-hmm.
wig is so extravagant that I'm just like, okay, that's a choice. His
His huge bare chest, his
yeah, like
amazing pectoral muscles.
his I mean his super thick necklace with it's just, and his performance is so, he's so intense. Like he, I think that I'm intense, and then I look at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's feeling every single emotion to the millionth degree of everything. And I remember there's this one part where someone says, like, because I wrote this down in my notebook, someone just says, we must withdraw. And he goes, no, no. like he's just so passionate. And like you said, full of revenge. And I I just think his character is insane. I think his performance is insane, but I mean that in a very, very positive way. And I think for me personally, my favorite shot in this whole movie was the opening, the first time that we see him, when we just see his gloves and he's taking the gloves off. I really, really love that shot of just these gloves and you don't know who it is who's wearing them. And it's just these black gloves with these silver, I don't even know what they are on top, and he slowly removes them from his hands one by one. And then it just shows his face. It's like, whoa, who is this
the
guy?
slow reveal where he peels back the veil from the bottom half of his face, and then he slowly takes the helmet off from the top half of his face. Yeah, it's a great villain reveal.
Yeah, it just, I think it, I don't know. In my opinion, I feel like he's the protagonist of this movie. I mean, antagonist, I guess, technically, but I feel like he's the main character. I feel like the whole story revolves around him. I find Kahn to be the most interesting character in this movie. I find everyone else to kind of just be, it's kind of like the world exists for Kahn and everyone else just lives in it. And
I think that's very much what Kahn himself would agree with.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone else is kind of, I don't want to say boring because they're not boring, but it's just, they are nowhere near, and any of their conflicts or anything, none of them are as interesting to me as what's going on with Kahn and in his like outrageous, just everything. So yeah, I really liked his character. And when they first revealed him, the only place that I'd ever seen this actor before, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the grandpa from Spy Kids.
Yeah. That was also the first thing I ever saw him in.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in this movie where I saw their faces and I was like, I never knew you were in Star Trek. Because the one lady on the ship who's got the big blowout, the black lady who's got the big blowout, I was like, oh my gosh, you're the mom from Snow Dogs.
And then, she really?
Yeah,
I've never seen
yeah,
Michelle Nichols.
Yeah,
and
the
legend.
The other guy, gosh, I'm gonna look up what his name is. He plays Sulu. Apparently his name is George Takei. I looked him up. Yeah. I looked him up on IMDb because I was like, why are you familiar to me? I know you play a butler in something, but I can't figure it out. He was on The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. And I was like, oh,
wait,
that's
what?
where I know. Yes. For
I did not know that.
For one episode. But it's crazy because all of these characters, I know them as like supporting characters from a kid's movie or a kid's TV show. And then I'm watching this and I'm just like, oh, worlds are colliding. This is interesting.
Where I'm sure that the whole joke about them being cast on those things is like, oh my gosh, it's Sulu from Star Trek. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, something for the parents to enjoy, you know? Mm-hmm. But anyway, that was completely getting off track. But yeah, I really like Kahn. I like his performance, or the actor's performance. I thought that I found it to be very, very engaging.
Good, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I really love, I mean, there's this great sort of theme running throughout it of parents and children, or, the older generation, the younger generation, that's mirrored in Spock's training relationship with Saavik, then also Kirk and his estranged son David. But then also Khan has this second in command. I think his name is Joachim or something like that. But he's his lieutenant basically, who keeps telling him like, stop doing this, turn back. We have our freedom. We can go anywhere we want. We can start our lives over. You don't need to be pursuing Kirk. And then at every turn, Khan is saying, no, 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 no. I have to. I've got to make Kirk suffer. And yeah, it's part of the tragedy of it is the way that he, by refusing to let this grudge go, he just robs all of his followers of what could have been the rest of their lives. And there's that moment toward the end when, the Enterprise is firing at the Reliant, and the bridge is all in disarray, and Joachim is like buried by rubble, and Khan just has this, he has all of this grief for him, for this character that he really seems to care about. He seems to have this fatherly affection for. But it's entirely his own fault for pursuing this thing that eventually gets his second in command killed.
Can I make a comment on that real quick?
Mm-hmm.
It's a silly comment. I'm sorry, but that moment when he lifts that door off of that guy, he's struggling so hard because it's supposed to be a heavy piece of metal. You can totally tell that it's just this light. I don't know if it's made out of foam or what, but I just found it funny that his performance is so much like, "Ah!" And then at the same time, it's like, that's a very light piece of scrap metal that just is painted to look real. I found that to be funny. There's a lot of, I think there's, I don't know, I found it to be interesting because I think there's a lot of stuff in this movie where the effects are done really, really well. I really liked a lot of the explosions inside of the ships were really impressive, and they've got this fire inside and all of these things. I'm like, wow, that's super, super well done. And they've got these really great hair and makeup and these burnt bodies, and they're like, so many things are done really, really well. And then there's certain things that happen that just kind of date it, like that, him picking up that piece of metal. And then there's another part where, just the fact that this is supposed to be the 23rd century and the technology is like eons behind where we are now.
Oh yeah, it's always hilarious to see what they imagine, like, television screens or computer screens are going to look like in the 23rd century.
It's just,
and they're so tiny.
It's so funny to me whenever, I mean, I think they did a great job considering when it was made, but those things are always just funny to me. And there was also a moment at the end when Kahn is kind of giving his last final speech before he goes off somewhere, where part of his prosthetic is coming off of his face, and you can see it. I'm like, let the makeup person go in there and just fix that. You guys can do another take. But
I remember, and this is like, a product of me seeing this at a much younger age. Maybe I wasn't even in middle school. Maybe I was younger than that. Maybe I was in elementary school. But I just remember being really haunted by the look of Kahn when, in the very final moments, when, he's mortally wounded and he's setting up the Genesis device to go off. I just remember being like, yeah, terrified by it. Like, it looks so creepy and disgusting and like horrifying to me. Of course, now, it maybe doesn't look quite quite that bad. But as a child, you got that very vivid imagination. You're like, oh gosh, this guy's skin is melting off his face. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, like that goes back to what I said in the beginning. I feel like even though I did enjoy this movie, I wish I had seen it when I was younger, and I could have, without all of this previous exposure to all of the other things that are in the world, I wish I could have seen this with a fresh brain, not knowing how much, I guess, I don't want to say better, but how much more advanced technology has gotten. I wish I could have just gone in with a clean slate, so I could have really just been terrified of all of these things. Although I will say, those little monster bug things that go into people's ears,
gosh.
Gross. I mean,
the effects on that are so well done.
Yeah, I'm a grown ass woman, and I was watching that, and I was like,
Yep.
yeah, I can't watch this. I'm going to look away because this is nasty. I can tell that the ear is fake. I know it's not real, but at the same time, gross.
Because it's like, it's the idea of it too. It's like, even if you intellectually know that the ear models that they're using are plastic, the idea crawling into your ear and oh gosh, and like
so
all the
gross. Even just thinking about it is like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Speaking of that too, I knew from the very beginning, once those two people or whoever it was went down to that planet, I was like, the black guy's gonna die. I know it. I just know the black guy's gonna die because they're setting it up that way, and it's always the black guy that dies first. I still don't understand why he died and the other guy didn't, because they both had the things in their ears, but either way.
I mean, the real answer is because the other guy is a Star Trek original series cast.
well, there you go. But yeah, I just thought that was, I don't know if funny is the right word, but I was like, yep, of course the black guy's dead. Knew it was coming.
Yep. Yep. Classic trope, unfortunately. But, um, so with the opening of the movie, one thing that I read while I was doing a little bit of quick internet research for this was that the idea that Spock was going to die was leaked out early on in this movie's production process, and fans were not happy. And so, what they did to counter this, or was, and again, very quick internet research, so I might be getting details of this wrong. But basically, the idea of the way that the opening set piece was created, where it's this training simulation where all of the original cast members die off and then it's revealed to be a training situation, was devised to kind of throw people off the scent so they could say, oh, that's what happened, and then enjoy the rest of the movie, and then you'd have the twist at the end that Spock died, which is, yeah, it's interesting thinking about like how twists and spoilers and things like that worked in the 80s versus now. But anyway, I do love the opening scene though, because it's just this great, like, we're all waiting for Captain Kirk, the reveal of Captain Kirk, and you have this, like, it's set up like an episode of Star Trek. All the characters you know and love are all in their individual places. And then it goes to the captain's seat, and who spins around in the chair? But it's not Captain Kirk. It's Lieutenant Savick, who is a young female Vulcan who is in training to become a captain. And then everything goes wrong in the mission. Everyone dies, seemingly. And then the doors open, and there's this great shot of the light and the silhouette, and Captain Kirk comes forward, and oh my gosh, there he is. Um, so yeah, I just found that an interesting way to set it up. I really enjoyed that setup. I don't know. What do you think of the opening?
Well, I wanted to ask because you're saying how much you appreciate and enjoy that kind of opening sequence with the simulation. Have you ever read the book Ender's Game?
I've not. No.
Do you know what it is?
I know that it's a sci-fi book about a, like, kid who is some sort of genius and is like made to do games, but as a way to like train him to save the world or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Not too
kind of.
clear on the details.
I think you might enjoy it because the premise of it is it is this kid and he is a genius and he's called to this place where, because he's the chosen one, as with like every book ever, because he's the chosen one, he has to go and prepare for these aliens that are supposedly coming to take over the world. And so his process of training to fight the aliens is he and like a space team and the people who run a ship, they get together and they do countless simulations over and over and over again, testing the scenarios of how they will fight these aliens and blah, 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 blah. So this just, I mean, Ender's Game came out I guess not way after this movie because it came out in the 80s. But if you're interested in a premise like that, Ender's Game is a good book and it is very similar, except it has... Yeah, it doesn't, I'm not going to spoil things, but it's a very good book. And if you like those types of concepts, I would highly recommend Ender's Game. But anyway, as far as the opening sequence, well, first of all, so the opening sequence with the credits and everything, I did want to say, I'm sure there's Trekkies out there, if there are Trekkies listening to this, that are going to be frustrated with me saying this, but I did feel like that opening credit sequence, the film score sounded a lot like Star Wars to me. And I don't know if that's just because that's what space sci-fi scores sounded like in general at that time. I don't think throughout the whole movie the film score sounds like Star Wars, but particularly that opening sequence, I was like, did John Williams do this? And then I saw it was James Horner and I was like, James Horner,
this was
I love you.
very early James Horner.
Yeah.
I think this might have been more or less his big break.
Yeah, I mean, I love James Horner, but that opening sequence, I was like, come on, man, do something a little more original. Come on. But anyway, yeah, I wanted to mention that, but I didn't feel that throughout the whole movie, just that opening sequence.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I have a note saying like how much I love the main theme that James Horner wrote, because it sounds to me like it's not the same song that was used in the original series, because the original series had a theme song and this is something
Isn't
different, but it's
the
so intertwined with Star Trek for me.
isn't the Star Trek, isn't it like da 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 da? Is that Star Trek or is that something else?
Yes, I believe so. Although I get confused, like without hearing it right in front of me, I do tend to mix up what the original series theme is versus what is the theme in this movie,
Oh,
because both
okay.
of them are so Star Trek for me. Because there's
But
also
isn't
the da da. Oh, never mind.
well isn't
Yeah,
isn't that one of them though? The da 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 da. Is that
I
one of them or
I
no?
believe so.
Okay.
Yeah,
We should have brought a Trekkie on here to help us
we
do this.
really should,
If there's any
or
Trekkie
someone who's
listening to
capable of
this,
like retaining music for
yeah,
more than.
like if there are any Trekkies listening to this, I sincerely apologize. We may or may not be butchering something that's very special to you. Because I remember when I was listening to there's a podcast for The Office where they're kind of just going through every episode of the show. It's called Office Ladies. And I remember they went on this stint for a while where Jenna, the woman who plays Pam, she had started watching Game of Thrones. And and Angela Kinsey, who plays Angela on the show, she was like, "Oh my gosh, you haven't watched Game of Thrones?" Blah, blah, blah. And because Angela's a huge fan. And so they would come on and they'd start talking about Game of Thrones. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you guys don't know anything about Game of Thrones. Please stop talking about it like this. This is something that's really important to me. And you sound like an idiot and you're ruining what I love." And so I sincerely apologize for doing that to Trekkie people. Um, but yeah, I don't, yeah. Anyway, what were we talking about? I'm
You were
sorry.
talking about the score.
Oh, yeah.
And we were talking about the opening more generally.
Yeah. Yeah, the opening. Yeah, I guess I don't have any major thoughts on that. When it did become a simulation, I kind of had a thought of, "Oh, that's interesting." But other than that, I didn't have any strong comments or feelings about that opening sequence.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, what I also love about the opening to this movie is that it introduces this concept of the Kobayashi Maru, which is a test that apparently every person who's on the track to become a Starfleet captain has to go through. And the idea is that it's a test not of ability, but of character, where you're presented with a no-win situation and you have to figure out how you deal with that. So, do you go pragmatically? Do you go in terms of, trying to rescue people, even if it's a lost cause? Like basically, just you're confronted with the idea that you are going to bring about death, whether it's the death of your own, of yourself, of your crew, of other people, and you have to, yeah, figure out how you're going to deal with that. And so throughout the film, in the opening scene, we see Lieutenant Savick take this test, and as expected, it ends in the destruction of her ship, and she's a little bit confused and you know unhappy with her own performance in it, um, because she feels frustrated. This is unfair. It's a no-win situation. Um, and throughout the film, she keeps asking Captain Kirk. Well, I keep saying Captain Kirk. It's Admiral Kirk in this movie, which is a big, big plot point. He was a captain in the original show, but since then he's accepted promotion. He's now an admiral. So he's no longer in the field. He's no longer commanding a spaceship. He's doing things like overseeing inspections and making sure that other people are ready to go out on their voyages. But so she keeps asking him, "How did you what did you do for the Kobayashi Maru? What was your experience of the test?" And he keeps putting it off and putting it off and not answering her. And then finally he reveals the fact that
I did love that reveal. I thought that was super
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so what he did basically is he cheated. He reprogrammed the test so that he could actually win. And that ends up becoming a huge part of the journey that he's going on through this movie, because this movie is so much about this idea of facing death and what do you do in the event that there's a situation where there's no way to win that does not bring about some sort of loss or sacrifice. And Kirk has always been this character who's kind of, he's not quite the like hotshot, reckless, you know, playboy that is, like to the extent that the J.J. Abrams movies present him as, but he's still, a character who's, he's very sure of himself. He's had a lot of adventures. He's definitely dated a lot of women. He's lived a lot of life, but he really hasn't gotten to the point where he has had to think about the idea of him dying or someone he loves dying. And so the Kobayashi Maru kind of becomes this um, sort of interesting way of comparing what his outlook is and what his experience is to the idea that everyone eventually has to confront, which is the idea that, death is inevitable. And at certain points, there's nothing that we can do um, to prevent the fact that we're going to have to confront death and the fact that people close to us are going to have to die. And so we just have to figure out how are we going to deal with that idea. And so that's very much what this movie is about, is Kirk coming face to face with this thing that he's never had to deal with and growing past it. Do you have any thoughts on that or any thoughts on the Kobayashi Maru test?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't know. I think I don't know if this means that I'm stupid or if we're just different in the way that we watch things, or if it's the fact that you've seen it more times than I have.
Sure.
Which I think that's probably what it is.
That's probably what it is.
But I feel like for me, I didn't really come out of this movie with any deep philosophical sort of anything. For me, it was kind of just an action movie where I just felt like, oh, that was a really fun time. And I think it's just because the way that I mean, it depends on the movie, but a lot of times when I watch things, it's kind of like the first time I watch it, I'm just having the experience. I'm not necessarily thinking about anything. And so I guess that's a long way of me saying a lot of these deep thoughts that you're having have not even occurred to me because I was kind of just watching and experiencing. And I think as you're saying all of these things, I see the themes and I'm connecting the dots, but it wasn't something where while watching it, I was like, oh, wow, this whole movie is a metaphor for how Kirk is dealing with death and life and aging. And it was just kind of like, oh, okay, he's having this conversation and now he's going over here and this person's coming after him and now this person died and now he's talking about death. And I don't know, like I saw those themes in those particular moments and it was specifically spoken, but I didn't really think about it in such a way where I was connecting it through threads throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that actually makes total sense because, when you said that you wish you'd seen this as a child, you'd first experienced this as a child. I remember when I first experienced this movie as a child, that was very much how I was taking it in. And just like enjoying the action, enjoying the sort of theatricality of the performances. I feel like this movie, one of the things that I love about this movie is that it really does reward rewatching it as you get older. Because I've seen this several times now. It had actually been several years since I'd seen it last. But every time I watch it now, the older I get, the more I relate to Kirk and relate to the emotions that he's feeling and relate to that sense of, regret and, multiple the way your life has branched at certain points and you chose one road to go down, but you always wonder about what could have happened if I'd gone down the other road. Or, I made this one choice when I was younger and now the consequences of it have come back to haunt me in a way that I didn't expect. That's something that's just universal emotions. Every single adult feels that and we only feel it more and more as we get older. But it's definitely something that I didn't notice on first on first watch. It's something that it becomes more clear to me with every subsequent time that I watch it, as I watch it as an adult, as I get older and rewatch it.
And I feel like in certain ways that's almost a sign of a movie being a really good movie, because it's something where, because there's a lot of movies out there where it's like, let's hit you over the head with our theme so that you know what we're trying to tell you. And that's just kind of like, you don't need to do that. Just let the audience experience it and feel it. You know, it doesn't have to be this thing where you're directly calling it out. And I feel like this movie does a really good job at, you can just watch it and enjoy it and kind of subtly feel those themes in the back of your mind. But then when you choose to go back and rewatch it, you can almost see it in a totally different light, because you know what's happening, you know the fun that's going on. So because of that, you're able to look deeper and kind of pull the layers back a little bit. And I mean, I've only seen this movie once, but I feel like that is representative of this being a good action film, because the first time you watch it, it can be seen as just action. But then when you peel back the layers, there's a lot of depth there. I just didn't necessarily get all the depth the first time around, but I can tell that it's there.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, that's what a really good action movie will do, is it'll, on the first watch, you can engage with on the level of just pure enjoyment. But then subsequent watches, you'll find more and more things to admire about it. Ways to relate to the characters, or things that it can teach you about life. Yeah, I really like that phrasing, and I hope I hope you come back to this movie at some point. Maybe not right away, but sometime in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely come back to it. I think it would be something that I don't know. I would love to watch it with my niece when she's old enough, and kind of see it through her eyes and just enjoy that experience with her. And then also having that be my second time, I can kind of go a little bit deeper. I don't know. I would love to watch this with her when she gets old enough.
Yeah. Oh, that would be great. Yeah. Yeah.
You could come watch it with us.
I'd love to. Yeah. And then you have to watch 3 and 4, and 4 is four is the comedic one. Which
one is the whale one?
Enjoy.
I want to watch the one with the whales.
Star Trek Save the Whales. That's number 4.
Oh my gosh, so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can I just say one thing? This is kind of my, because again, while watching this movie, I kind of just was experiencing it and not thinking too much. So I don't have extensive notes. So that being said, whatever you have to say, I will respond as best I can.
Sure.
But so this is my last note that I have. And it kind of has to do with this movie as well as lots of other movies that I've seen. Something that I won't say it's a pet peeve, because it doesn't make me mad. I just find it to be really funny, is that in a lot of these older movies, where particularly in between the 60s and the 80s, there is this like ridiculously fake sound of shoes when people are walking that has bothered me ever since I was like 10 years old, because it's like, everyone sounds like they're wearing high heels, and they make the shoes unnecessarily loud. Like, the shoe sounds should not be as loud or louder than the dialogue. It's unnecessary. It doesn't need to be that way. And there is so much of that in this movie, because there's a lot of people walking around. And so it's just like, can we please turn the shoes down a little bit, you guys?
That is hilarious. I have to say, that is not what I expected you to say. But I love it. I agree.
It's something that shows up in so many movies from this time period, and it's always struck me as just being funny and distracting. But anyway, so that's my last note that I have on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
All right, well, duly noted.
So thanks for listening, you guys, and talk to you next week.
Yep. That's it. Yeah, so there's a couple other things that I just wanted to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. I don't want to stop. Go for it.
Well, I mean, obviously you should have saved your shoe point for the final, so that we could end on that rhetorical question of,
right.
What were they doing? What were they putting in their shoes back then?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I wanted to just take a couple minutes and just talk about some of the performances of the secondary characters in this. I really enjoy the character of Lieutenant Savick. She's played by Kirstie Alley, who just recently passed away, but I think she does a
Wait,
really, really great.
what? How did she
Yeah,
die? She wasn't that old, was she?
I do not know. I just know that she recently passed away.
Oh, she was 71. Maybe it was. Yeah, okay. Anyway, R.I.P.
R.I.P. But yeah, I really think she's good at very good in this movie. She does the I think she does a good job of projecting the Vulcan uh logic, lack of emotionality for the most part. But I read well, I read hmm yeah. hmm Yeah, well, I read something about how the idea behind her character is that she's half Vulcan and half Romulan, which means that she has access to a little bit more emotionality than a pure Vulcan would. Similar to Spock, because Spock is half Vulcan, half human. Um, but yeah, so for the most part, she is that kind of um, yeah, like purely logical, kind of cold character. But you do see these moments of emotion peeking out. I think she expresses a little bit of annoyance with herself in her performance in the Kobayashi Maru, um, which is great. And yeah, I just really enjoy her sort of mentor-mentee relationship with Spock and with Kirk at different points. She's clearly this very talented up-and-coming officer who is just, yeah, looking for some kind of direction from these two legendary Starfleet officers. The character of David I think, is probably to me the one that I struggle with the most with this movie. I like the idea of the character in general. So David is the estranged son of Captain Kirk. So Captain Kirk he'd previously been in a relationship with Dr. Carol Marcus. She got pregnant. The two of them apparently at some point in the past made the decision that David was going to stay with Dr. Marcus and she was going to raise him, and Kirk is not going to be involved in his life. So as a result, David has grown up kind of, and he's this very sort of idealistic, impulsive character. He's a scientist like his mother, and he really looks down on the military, and he sees them, or at least Starfleet really sees them as kind of a um, reckless and power hungry and a source of danger for what they're trying to achieve. And he has this very negative view of Kirk that changes throughout the movie. So I really like the idea of this character. I think it's a really interesting way to have Kirk kind of confront his own flaws by suddenly being reunited with this son that he hasn't seen in a very long time and seeing how negatively his son looks at him, and then kind of having the two of them reeval- reevaluate their perceptions of each other throughout the movie. I don't know if the movie fully pulls it off, just because I don't really like the actor who plays the son very much. I did not look up his name, so I don't want to like call him
I've
out
got the
by
whole
name. But
cast pulled up right here so that I can know who you're talking about.
okay,
The actor's name is Merritt Buttrick.
okay, yeah. I can't remember ever seeing him in anything else, so maybe he's a good actor in other things. I've just never been super impressed with his performance as David. Um, but yeah, I like the idea of the character, and I like the role that he functions in Kirk's journey. Yeah, I struggle with the actual performance of that character. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on David or Dr. Marcus actually?
Um, Dr. Marcus is the woman, right?
Yeah,
No.
Carol Marcus.
Oh, sorry. Okay, gotcha. I was confusing her with the other woman. I literally have the cast pulled up here because there's so many people, and I'm like, I don't know who
Yeah, and half
anyone
of
is.
them have names that are not English
Yeah.
names.
Oh, and half of them they don't really mention their names other than like one time. So,
It's true, yeah.
so
This is one of
Carol,
those movies where it really helps to have subtitles turned on for learning
so
people's names.
so Carol is the mom. Yeah,
hmm
I mean, we we talked a little bit about this yesterday because I called Geneva last night and I was like, I just want to make sure I understood what happened.
What's going on in this
Um,
movie?
yeah, I mean, I kind of felt like, I mean, as far as her performance goes, I liked her performance. I
Yeah,
did
I
just,
actually really, really like the actress who plays Dr. Marcus. I think she does a great job of being sort of, she's the actress, she's very beautiful, she's very intelligent, and you can see what Kirk was attracted to about her. And she's also very pragmatic in the way that's very different from David. David is very like, Starfleet, Captain Kirk. And she's like, well, now hang on. Let's like, I know what Kirk is like. I know what Starfleet is like. Let's think about this and let's, figure out a solution. And I don't know. I like her a lot. But sorry, I interrupted you.
um, yeah, so I liked her performance, but I think, I guess kind of similar to what you said, but I'll take it a little bit further. I did kind of feel like the whole story arc with Kirk and his son and his lady friend, I don't know, it didn't really feel earned to me. I felt like at the ending it was trying to have this real heartfelt moment about like family and family is important, and I don't know, it just didn't feel earned to me. It just, it rang hollow, and I don't know if that's because of the Merritt Buttrick's performance or what, but I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like Carol's character was kind of thrown in out of nowhere. It's like she's this scientist or analyst or whoever she is, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, we have a kid. It's like, oh, okay. I don't know. It felt that storyline felt very tacked on to me, and I think that there was a lot of potential for that to be just a lot more of a stronger element to help round out Kirk's character and complete his story arc. And I think it was a good idea. I just feel like it wasn't fleshed out enough. But like I said, I liked the actress who plays Carol. I liked her performance. Yeah, and the son, just his character in general, didn't really do it for me.
Yeah.
Not just the acting, but just in general, that character,
Yeah.
I didn't do much for me.
Yeah. Well, I think too, not to keep slandering poor Merritt Buttrick, I think that it's not really helped by the script, because I think if the script had been a little bit more interested in filling out David's character, and Carol's too to some extent, but helping us understand a little bit more of what their experiences are like without Kirk in their lives, I think, or who they are or what they want, apart from their relationship to Kirk, that probably would have helped with my concerns. It would have helped David feel like a more fully rounded character rather than a device for having Kirk examine his own mortality. I do want to also just give a shout out to, I really love the costume design and the production
Mm,
design in this movie.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mentioned before that the red uniforms, this is the first time that, to my knowledge, Trekkies can correct me if I'm unaware of some other property, but I believe this is the first time that they've been introduced into the Star Trek universe, and I think they look really great. They give a nice uniformity to all the characters. They kind of,
Uniformity. Was that
yes.
a pun? Was that a pun intended or no?
No, it's not.
Well, there you go. But
Yeah. um, yeah, they kind of give the sort of military aspects of it while also making they're very kind of streamlined. You can see them being used well in action. I love the little flap on the front of it, because whenever someone is kind of distressed or in danger or in a stressful situation, that flap will fall down, and they just like there's just that little bit of undershirt peeking through, and they look a little bit undressed. You can kind of tell what their mental state is at the time. That's great. I love the look of Kirk's apartment when we get to see it, where it's this futuristic space apartment, and yet he's fully decked it out with all of these kind of antiques from, probably 500 plus years ago, years before his time, and all of this military and naval equipment and everything, which is so perfect for his character. The fact that both of his friends, for his birthday, give him antiques. Spock gives him a book, and Bones gives him glasses so he can actually read the book. Like, it's just very sweet. They know him so well.
Speaking of Kirk's friends and Spock, I think this is something that probably would have been a bigger deal had I had the history of seeing the TV show and the first movie and all of that stuff. But I don't know. I felt like this is kind of jumping forward, I guess, and maybe going off on a little bit of a tangent. But I felt like this whole ending sequence of Spock dying and Kirk coming down and they have this conversation through the glass and all of that stuff. I loved that moment, but at the same time, I felt like the movie did not really establish their friendship very much. And maybe that's because I didn't, like I said, I didn't have the backstory of their relationship and seeing them build it over time and in previous, what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
Iterations or something like
yeah,
that.
iterations or canon or whatever. But I kind of just felt like they kept saying, "You're my best friend. You're my best friend. You're my best friend." But I didn't really see much of that actually coming across in terms of how they interact with each other or whatever. But I don't know. I just like I saw Spock being very sacrificial in terms of I'm going to be the one that goes down to the planet. I'm going to be the one that does these things. And he was very caring towards the crew as a whole, and the crew was very appreciative of the sacrifices that he made. But I didn't feel that emotional connection specifically between Kirk and Spock, if that makes sense. And I don't know if that's yeah, I don't know. That just I'm not going to say it didn't work for me because I think that moment at the end was very emotional, but I wish that there had been more of that.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. I feel like it might be a little bit of a both and where if you had, if you had seen the TV show before or seen any of the other movies before, things like that, if you had more of a context for the relationship, it might have helped it to hit harder. But I wonder if, too, a subsequent viewing of the movie where you are, you know, able to focus more on the character relationships and the interactions they're having with each other might help because there are a couple of really important and I think really sweet conversations that Kirk has throughout the movie with Spock, with Bones as well. Bones is my favorite character, so I'm always on
I
the
I
lookout for.
definitely I definitely felt the friendship chemistry between Bones and Kirk for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, there's that really wonderful scene where Kirk goes to see Spock when he first gets the message that they need to go out and investigate what's going on with the regular space station, and he's like, "Well, I don't want, I'm just here on an inspection. I don't want to impose. I don't want to be taking over." And Spock's like, "No, no, you're the senior officer. You're supposed to be taking over. Like, this is what's supposed to happen." And then he has that great line where he says, "You forget, I'm a Vulcan. I have no ego to bruise. Like, stop trying to make me feel better. I am a Vulcan. You are not making me feel any better." And and then there's that really great, moment where he just basically speaks frankly to Kirk and says, "You really should never have taken this promotion because it's not right for your personality, it's not right for your gift set. You are supposed to be out having adventures and not sitting behind a desk and conducting inspections." And you just, for me at least, and again, like I do have the context of having seen much more Star Trek than you do, but I feel like I can really see the chemistry between these two characters and see the history where he's like, "I know you so well and I know that this is not right for you, and I'm going to tell you so." And, and it's out of care and concern for you. And he has that line where he says, "You are my superior officer, and you are also my friend. I have been and always shall be yours." And again, with Spock and with, you know, prior knowledge of Spock and, him as this half Vulcan, generally very logical and very unemotional character, to have him say "you are my friend" is, it's a big thing for his character to really be expressing affection for another person. So yeah, like I said, I think it's a little bit both and where I think the more you interact with Star Trek, that backstory between the characters will help to fill in, but also I think on subsequent viewings it might also help to just be focusing more on the interactions that they do have in this movie.
Mhm. Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I want to feel the friendship love. I do. I really want to. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just shout out to, like, I mean, it almost goes without saying because these are actors who've been inhabiting these characters for decades at this point when this movie is made. But, all the performances from the main cast are so good. And in particular, I mean, Leonard Nimoy as Spock is just such an all-time classic character. And playing a character who is so unemotional and so cold in certain ways can be, I think, very difficult. And he always manages to do it so well where you can always tell that there is an emotion bubbling beneath the surface, even if it's very subtle. Just the little crick of an eyebrow or something like that. You can tell how he is reacting to something someone says. And one underrated part of Star Trek that I really enjoyed when I finally went back and watched the main series and then kind of got new appreciation for the movies as well. I really love the dynamic between Spock and Bones, where they have this sort of it's it's this funny dynamic where it's like here's Kirk and then he's two best friends and the two best friends are kind of forced to endure each other because they have this friend in common. But there's this kind of mutual antagonism between the two of them, but there's also a lot of love and affection between them. And so every time they interact, they're always in some sort of spat about something. So they talk about in this movie they're talking about Genesis, and Bones, of course, is very pessimistic about it. And he's like, "Oh my goodness, look at the destructive possibilities of this thing. We're all playing God. What's going on?" And then Spock is very just sort of coldly analyzing the scientific interest of it. Bones gets all offended, but yeah, I really love their their dynamics because you really can tell that even though they spar with each other, they both enjoy the sparring. They really do have a lot of affection for each other, and yeah, so every time they get to interact with each other, in the TV show or in the movies, I always enjoy that a lot.
Yeah. Again, I think, Geneva, I do think that you are benefiting a lot more from the fact that you have watched other iterations of Star Trek, because I think I understand what you're saying, but I feel like at the same time I'm like, I didn't get any of that. Like I get I see the bits and pieces of it, but there's nothing of like, oh my gosh, I love the banter between these two, or I love it. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, they're bantering, that's cool. I feel like it is something where you do kind of have to have a previous relationship to these things. And this is not me saying I'm going to go back and watch everything Star Trek, because I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to do that.
Probably not.
But I do think that there is a lot going on here in terms of like emotional connection between characters that you can't really fully connect with unless you've seen the TV show.
Yeah, or at least kind of seen the other movies and seen them multiple times to really understand the dynamics and connect with them. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely see that being the case. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me try to see if I have any other notes of things I want to talk about. There's just so many great little moments, and as I said before, there are so many lines in this movie that I really love. I love the part where Kahn is like, "I've hurt you, and wish to go on hurting you."
His performance, like I said in the
It's so
beginning,
good.
is insane. But like
It
in the
really
best,
is.
like I mean that in a totally positive way, but it is it's insane.
Yeah, there are so many references to classic literature in this movie, which again I think is something that helped me to connect with it early on because I was a big um,
I'm
English literature
sorry.
fan.
I'm sorry. Was? You just said was.
Am fine. Kirk quoting A Tale of Two Cities at the end after Spock's sacrifice. I mean, just Tale of Two
Geneva, have
Cities, a
we
book which never fails to make me cry.
Geneva, have we ever talked about A Tale of Two Cities? Do you like that book?
I love that book. I have one major reservation with that book, but at the same time, I've read it a few times and I always cry. So,
Okay.
yeah. What about
Gotcha.
you? Do you have strong feelings about that book?
I do. My strong feelings are that I think that it's a really powerful story that could have been told in 100 pages instead of 500.
Well, this is what everyone always says about Charles Dickens. And
I
I'm
mean,
like, I disagree. But I understand.
I genuinely love the story of that book, but had I not been forced to read the entire thing because it was required in my English honors class, there's no way I would have kept reading. It's just like there's so much. And of course, there's a whole joke and cliche of he was paid by the word, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And it freaking shows, man. I'm just like, gosh, you don't need all of this other stuff. So I do have strong feelings in that I do really like the story, but also way too long. Way too long.
Yeah.
Way too
See,
long.
I disagree, but I also completely understand because we read so much Charles Dickens in high school, and I was the only person in my classes who ever enjoyed it. And I just feel like English classes have so much to answer for making high school kids hate great works of literature that they would otherwise have loved if they encountered them in other circumstances.
I don't know. I think I mean, this is a total tangent, but I also think that like, I don't know. I read a lot of other books in my English classes in high school that are really long classics that I was able to connect with. Like, I was required to read East of Eden, which has become one of my favorite books of all
Yeah,
time.
that's one
I've
of your
read it
favorites,
like
isn't it?
3 times. It's a very long book. It was written a while ago. But at the same time, it is very engaging and it has a fantastic story. And it's one of those things where it's like, yes, English classes do tend to make things a lot less, I guess, engaging, or not less engaging, but they kind of inhibit your motivation to actually, because it's assigned to you, you kind of already have this mentality of like, oh, I don't want to like it because I'm being forced to read it. But if a book, I'm not going to say if it's good, because I do think Tale of Two Cities is good, but I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't necessarily
Yeah.
blame English classes on the reason why a lot of people think that A Tale of Two Cities
Yeah.
is too long.
Well, with Charles Dickens, at least for me, we really are on a tangent, but that's fine.
It's okay. Welcome to me and Geneva's friendship.
Yeah. For me, with Charles Dickens, so much of his books, it's not just about the plot, it is about really settling in and meeting all of these different characters and different levels of society and hearing his sort of editorializing and satirizing of the society around him. And so if you're going into his books saying, this is about the plot, why is the plot not being delivered at a steady pace? You're going to get so frustrated. Like, for me, the enjoyment of reading Charles Dickens is, the plot is part of it, but a lot of it is also the humor with which he describes the characters and the, oh, here's a chapter where we're just going to go off on a little tangent and meet this random character who only, partly ties into the plot, but it allows me to kind of explore this tiny little micro subsection of Victorian society and what I have to think about it and things like that. And yeah, like it's definitely your mileage may vary. It works for me. I 100% can see why it does not work for everybody. Like in Great Expectations, which is probably my favorite Charles Dickens novel, although I do need to reread House. There's this one chapter where the main character goes home to have dinner with his friend, Mr. Wemmick, who is just a complete side character. He does not play any important role in the main plot whatsoever. It's just one chapter where he goes on a little side tangent and then it never is affecting the main plot again. But I think about that chapter and the character of Mr. Wemmick so much because he's this character who has this terrible job with this oppressive boss, and when the main character first meets him, he describes Mr. Wemmick as having this mouth that is like a straight line. It's like a post box, and he's so stern and unemotional. And then when he goes home to eat dinner with him, he says, as they're walking out and as they're walking home, Mr. Wemmick's mouth gradually just started to loosen and relax and unfurl. And all of a sudden, he becomes more animated and emotional and gregarious. And it's just when you're working a job that is a stressful job where you're very frustrated about what's happening every day and you can't say anything, which like a lot of us can relate to, it's just such a perfect description for how that feels, you know? And so even though this thing does not in any way tie into the plot, it's still a character description that I just think about all the time because I'm like, yes, Mr. Wemmick, I know how you feel. Anyway, sorry, that's a complete tangent, but that's just like a little subsect.
I started the
What I love about
tangent,
Dickens.
so I
Yeah.
started the tangent. I take full blame, take full responsibility. Geneva and I are starting a book podcast. No, we're not.
No, we are
I
not.
feel like that would be terrible because you and I have very different taste in books, and I feel like we
Do and
don't really cross over at any point.
yeah. Well, and it would also just be like, I don't read enough. So it would be great because it would get me to read more, but also I feel like we
Uh,
would only be able to record an episode every 3 months. So
yeah. You
yeah,
got to pick. You got to watch movies or are you going to read books? Well, I've made
yeah.
my choice, which is not to say I don't read. I do read. I just, yeah. Anyway, wow. Let's get back to the movie. Do you have any more thoughts,
Okay.
Geneva, or should we close out?
Yeah, not really. Just again, how much I really like the final scene, you know, Kirk's Spock's sacrifice, the image of him and Kirk saying goodbye to each other through the glass, and the way that again Leonard Nimoy's performance where he's kind of curled up against the wall in a way that we've never seen Spock be before. Like he's such a controlled character, and then seeing him be unsteady and basically dying. Like the makeup they put on his face to make it look like his skin
Basically
is burning
dying?
off.
He
Well,
is dying. He's not
yes. I
basically
mean,
dying.
yes. Yeah, that's right. You're correct. Yes. But yeah, the makeup they put on his face to make it look like his skin is beginning to peel off, and it's really just sad and horrifying. And they give the Vulcan salute to each other through the glass. Kirk looks so shell shocked. And then he gives that beautiful eulogy at his funeral where William Shatner's voice just breaks. And yeah, I think it's even though, you know, I mean, I don't at the time there was not an official plan to bring Spock back. There are hints in the movie where Spock could be brought back if they wanted to, and obviously there are more movies where Spock is in them, so Spock is going to be brought back. But if you're an audience member at the time, you have no guarantee that that's going to happen. So you have to watch this movie in the context of, you know, this is a complete story where Kirk is having to go through these emotions of I have lost my friend and I have no reason to think I'm ever going to see him again. And I think it's just yeah, I think the performances are great and I think it's just a really beautiful moment.
I feel
So
like you have to, well, you don't have to, but I kind of make a connection between that and Game of Thrones / A Song of Ice and Fire. If you don't want spoilers for that, skip forward 45 seconds. But kind of like when Jon Snow dies in the book,
mm,
because the book came out long before the TV show did. It was like, oh my gosh, Jon Snow's dead. And then in the TV show, it was like, oh my God. I mean, a lot of people binge watched it, so they didn't get that effect because they just watched the next episode. But there definitely was a shock of like, oh my gosh, this main character is dead. What happens now? Anyway, I don't want to go on too long because I said skip forward 45 seconds and I don't want to like spoil that for people.
but yeah. But
I
yeah,
feel
and
like
there's
there
also
is
that
kind of a similar, I mean, obviously this is not like this has been done many times, but it just in my brain, it kind of seems similar.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Geneva,
Mhm.
can I ask you a question before we kind of like move on to the ending section here?
Sure.
So my question is, I saw that on Letterboxd you rated this as 5 stars. I'm genuinely curious because you watch a lot of movies, which is just obvious, but why for you is this movie a 5 star film and not like 4 or 4.5? Because I know that this is a movie that you enjoy, but 5 stars makes me think that this is a perfect film for you and it's something that you really like. What makes this a 5 star film for you? I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah, it's funny you say that actually, because when I rewatched it the other night, I was intending to give it 4.5, and then I saw that I'd previously given it 5 stars, and so I just stuck with the 5 star rating. I should probably lower it to 4.5 for it to be more accurate, because as I said, I do have that one reservation about the character of David. And I feel like more characterization could have been given to him to make that plot line stronger. But yeah, for me, it's definitely at minimum a 4.5 star movie. Yeah, I mean, like we've been saying, it's just a movie that I think does a really good job of balancing the sort of fun, propulsive action storyline. It's a movie that's just, it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch Ricardo Montalban go all out as Kahn. It's fun to watch all these great lines. It's the way seeing Kirk try to outsmart his enemy is really fun. But it does have these sort of deeper layers that become really, that are very relatable and thoughtful, and that I just appreciate more and more as I get older. And again, seeing, having interacted with the characters in some form or another for a long time, seeing the way that they interact with each other is just, it's just a pleasure to see um, these characters with this great chemistry and this long history with each other, and the way that they interact in these different situations. So, yeah, I just think it's a really, really well done movie that sticks with me, and I can appreciate more and more with every subsequent viewing. You know, it's not it's not a movie that's on my personal top 10 of all time, but it is a movie that I think is just extremely well done and really resonates with me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was just curious.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question.
Thanks.
All right. Well, so to move on a little bit, I did not do a huge amount of research into the um, kind of critical legacy of this movie. This movie currently on Rotten Tomatoes is 86% fresh. Metacritic has it at 68. It's always kind of difficult to get accurate readings on both those things when the movie is a bit older. But I did find one quote from Angie Arrigo at Empire Magazine. So this is a review that she wrote in, I believe, 2000 or 2001. She said, the most elegiac? Yes, elegiac. Like, it's one of those times when you see a word and you've read it many times, but you've never actually had to sound it out loud.
Well, I have literally never even read that word, so I can't help you with pronouncing
Okay.
it.
It's from the idea of the word elegy. So, most elegiac of the big screen treks. The adventure celebrates comradeship above all the other fundamentals imperatives of the Trek ethos, like courage, curiosity, and cultural imperialism. LOL. And it's a tale told with considerable warmth and humor, some spiffing explosions, and a multiple hanky act of self-sacrifice to round things off. So, I thought that summed it
I
up
have
pretty well.
no idea what a multiple hanky act of self-sacrifice is. Does that mean like crying and you have to take a hanky out
Yeah,
to
I
wipe
think
your
so.
eyes?
Like
Okay,
it
gotcha.
makes you, forces you to use multiple hankies, which
Gotcha.
I won't.
When was that
Yeah.
review written? Because hankies, I feel like no one uses that word anymore.
I know. 2000 or 2001. I don't think people were using hankies even then, but sure.
Get with the
It's a phrase.
times, Angie. Come on.
Come on. All right. So, in terms of what moves us about this movie, I mean, I've sort of expressed this already, but again, just the older I get, the more I can really relate to Kirk's um, the confrontation he has with growing older, and the idea of regret and dealing with the consequences of your actions. And yeah, I just think it's really beautiful and well done. And then also, again, just every line that comes out of Khan's mouth just really sticks with me, really rattles around in my brain at odd times. And Khan, like his final dying moments, his sort of, very much vengeance to the death of both of us is just, yeah, it's so operatic, the register at which he operates. And yeah, it's really great. So I don't know, anything about this movie stick out or move you in any particular way?
I think the two main ones are I really was struck by the special effects in this movie. I don't know how they did those explosions inside such small interior sets. I don't know if that's because like fire safety was a lot more lax back then. Now it's like if we have a candle on set, it's like, let's have a fire safety meeting. But I mean, anyway, I was really impressed by the special effects. And then also I have to agree with you. Kahn's performance is crazy. And it's just, you can't not look at him. He demands your attention, and he's
He really
crazy
does.
and I love it. And that opening shot of his gloves really, really is fantastic. But yeah, I guess those are the things that are gonna stick with me.
All right, so Tatum, do you want to reveal what we're going to be covering in the next episode?
Yeah, so next week we're going to be shaking things up a little bit because as a lot of people know, coming up this weekend is the Oscars ceremony.
Yay.
So yeah, so
Super
Geneva and I will
excited.
yes, it's going to be an interesting ceremony. I kind of feel like everything I want to win, not one of them is going to win. But we'll see. So yeah, next week we'll be doing kind of just a discussion around just the winners, the nominees, the ceremony in general, and go from there. So join us for that. Watch the ceremony if you'd like. And also, I know a lot of people aren't emailing us, but if anyone wants to email us, I would love to hear the things that you guys wanted to win and things that you were disappointed about. I would love to hear other people's feedback. So feel free to email us about that if you'd like. But yeah, it should be fun. It's going to be a good time. Geneva and I have these discussions every year, so it'll be fun to record it and share it with you guys. So yeah, join us for that. It'll be a good time.
All right. Well, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpickpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like this show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Till next time.